So for this trip we've come somewhere really special, and I think I've been lucky enough to fish loads of different lakes, probably hundreds of different lakes and rivers all over England, Europe, even into America, and every now and again you go somewhere that is really special. And this place, which is called the Carp Reserve in deepest, darkest northern Essex, is really special, and I felt that magic of the place from the minute I walked on here. It's a very small lake, it's about 3 acres or so, festooned with tiny little dot islands, and as you can see, very weedy indeed. It's got a stock of 70 or 80 fish which have been in here a long time, some really old ones, and that's what caught my eye in the first place. And they can be, of course, very elusive because the water is absolutely tap clear. You've got loads of weed, and the lake is very shallow. It's probably averages about 4 foot all over, so it's very tricky fishing. I think the fish have been hiding underneath these thickets of duckweed in this part of the lake for a lot of their time, and when it gets dark, which even though it's only lunchtime isn't too far from now, I think they venture out using the confidence of the darkness that they get from that, because as I said, the water is very clear, and they come out, and I think you've got a chance during those hours of darkness. Apparently the last couple of fish that have been out have been just before dawn, so it's not ideal for filming fish action, but most lakes at this time of year do go very nocturnal. It's just the nature of the beast, but that's only if we can catch one, because I did my first trip here. It's a new ticket. I've got a winter ticket for here after my old mate Joe Morgan gave me a nod on it, and I came up here last week and I did 2 nights and I didn't catch anything, so probably a little bit of a risky one to turn up for one night's filming, but I like a challenge, and I wanted you guys to see this place because it is very unique and very special. We've got no intrusive sounds other than the sounds of nature. We're here so far in the middle of nowhere. There's no roads, there's no trains, there's no planes, just nothing, just fields, hundreds of acres of fields in every direction, and a big nature reserve. And so that, of course, ticks an awful lot of boxes in its own right. But believe me, the fish are very special. They're old, but they're in very good order. They've been in here a long time. It's an old gravel workings. I don't know why it's only 4 foot deep. It's probably one of those workings that didn't really pay the bills for the gravel company and they abandoned it. And as part of the process that they're due to do, or they're obligated to do, is to, with all gravel workings, is to finish with the place being landscaped and stocked with fish. So the fish went in here about 27 years ago, and they are a really nice strain of commons and mirrors. Biggest fish is about 38 pound, that's a common, and there's probably maybe 10 30s in here behind that, each one very special in its own right. But what makes it really special is the lake itself. You know, you can see the work that the guys have put into this, making it an electrified otter fence all the way around, which is so essential, and beautiful old swim. This one's called hobbits. You know, it's just got a lot of character, which is very rare in this day and age. And as I said at the start, you know, as soon as I set foot on here, I knew that this was somewhere very special indeed. The fishing is a little bit unique because you're allowed to use a boat to go out and look at spots and place your rigs. And when I heard that, I thought, well, I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm just going to fish flying chods and use a throwing stick or something like that. But having been out in a boat and had a look, it would be very difficult to fish the main part of the lake in any other fashion. Most of as you look over into the water, let's say it's 4 foot deep, 5 foot deep, the weed will come up to about that high off the bottom, and it's really thick silkweed and a bit of Canadian as well. Very difficult to present in or over. So you're looking for those little clearings that the fish have made naturally. You see rubbing spots against bits of wood on the bottom where the fish have been flanking and rubbing, that have created clear spots, and natural feeding spots as well, just sandy little hollows that just glow up at you. And so we will be using a boat, so it's unique fishing, so you guys can see how I go about that. I've got a very small little inflatable, and I'll go out nice and quietly, place the rigs by hand, and I'll show you more about what I'm going to be doing as we get through the session, but we've got about 2.5, 3 hours until the light goes today. We wanted to get here earlier, but life takes over, you know, school runs and everything else. So it's about a month before Christmas. It's going to be dark by 4 o'clock, but out there somewhere are some really, really amazing looking carp. I'm going to start off in a swim that I fished last week, because when I left I baited some of the spots, not heavily but with enough to show that, you know, if it's been fed on by something other than birds, I'll be able to see. So my first port of call is going to be pump up the boat, go out and check those spots, and then make the plan from there. But I think it's very likely I'll be fishing just up the bank here where I fished last week, and time to get cracking on this magical, amazing little lake called the Carp Reserve. Well, that was very interesting. Two of the spots that I baited last week are tripled or quadrupled in size, and they really do look game on. One of them's where I didn't expect it to be. It was really kind of a backup spot, and I just put a bit of bait on it. One of the spots that I had a rod on for 24 hours though, I've just been out and checked that one, and that still looks exactly the same. Obviously my rig's not there, but everything else about it is the same. So they're obviously very, very fussy about where they will feed. But we've got more than enough to go on. This is definitely the area we want to start off. Crows are signalling that dusk is coming in. So I'm going to get myself sorted, tie a few new rigs, and deploy the rods while I've still got enough light to see the bottom, because even though it's shallow and the water's clear, it's still, you know, 4 or 5 foot down, it is still a bit tricky. But let's crack on, it looks really good. A bit of time clearing the weed before you can even see the spots. I've definitely been out and about since last week, because still see the bottom and everything, see every detail, but there was a tinge in the water that wasn't there before. Not had any rain. That's the spot there. Everything has to be done with a good measure of precision, patience, accuracy, stealth. You don't want anything banging in the boat. Okay, spot's primed up. All we've got to do is get the rig down there. I say all we've got to do, that's quite often the hardest bit. beautiful. Spin the boat round. Get the line out of the tree, would be good. So, through the line there, and back we come. Make sure that leader's lying out perfectly, and then we have to get the tip under the water because of all this duckweed. And bring it all the way home. As I said, you would not be doing this across a big pit in a wind. You don't even leave a channel when you've been through it. Right. Next one, honestly, this is savage. So the rods are out, and there was a proper mission. The weed has changed a lot just since last week. We've had no wind at all, so it's fragmenting and dispersing around the whole lake, whereas before the westerlies of last week were pushing it into one half, which meant that you could fish the other half. But now line lay's non-existent, and I'm worried that even if I do hook a carp, I'm not sure whether the stuff's going to clog the top ring. So even with a boat at my disposal, I'm not sure it's going to be, yeah. But hooking one is going to be hard work anyway, because I've miscalculated this session. I thought we had 2 nights, but we only got 1 night. And having done a 2-night blank last week, and faced with this really, really difficult fishing situation, I'm not really overly confident. But I've done everything as good as I can do it, and now it's time to sit back and soak up the solitude and peace and quiet of this lovely lake. There's carp out there. I've got a feeling we might hear 1 or 2 tonight. I did hear them in the dark last week. You know, that's when they seem to come out to play from wherever they're hiding under those dark weed caves that they spend the days in. But I've got big heavy leads on the rods. And the reason for that again is just like when you're paying out line coming back to the bank, you want to make sure that no matter what happens, that rig stays in situ. So I baited the spots quite lightly, both on spots that I got fed on last week, and I baited a couple of backup spots as well. So if nothing happens, I can check those tomorrow, and you know, if they're cleaned off, then I can recalculate for the second night. I might stay on my own, but. Yeah, this is the glory of the beginning of winter, isn't it? 4 o'clock, almost dark, but it's incredibly warm. There's a couple of mosquitoes out, so we'll take that. It feels quite carpy. It's high pressure, cloudy, solid cloud, windless, quite atmospheric. And any other time, I'm always confident, I really am, but I'm not as confident tonight. I'm not sure why. Something's niggling away at me, but we're going to do the best we can, and I'm going to give you an update in a few hours by bivvy light, and let you know if anything's occurred, let you know if we've heard any out there rolling in the shallows. Let's see what happens. So, little diary update. We're about 9:30 in the evening now, and there has actually been a fair bit of activity, more than last week. It feels like a different lake this week. It felt like last week the fish were just running scared, but I think they're marauding about out there in the darkness tonight. I heard about 4 good boshes, different parts of the lake, which is interesting, shows they're spread about maybe a little bit too much. But I've had a couple near where I'm fishing, and I've had liners on on both of the rods, so that's very, very encouraging. And one fish boshed out very, very close to the spot. Very hard to tell exactly where, because you know, you sort of have a look for where the ripples are, but they're just completely soaked up by these huge balls of green cotton wool that are floating on the surface. So hard to pinpoint, but my ears are quite directionally good in the dark, and yeah, they were close by, so I wasn't really feeling it earlier. The placement of the rigs was stressful and difficult, and you know, it was so hard to keep the lines clean and keep the rods functional, and I was getting weed jammed in the rings, and it was a bit of a mission, but it's all done now. This is the quietest, most peaceful lake I've ever been to, and there's a midnight express train running over there somewhere. It's probably about 2 miles away, but because it's so quiet, it sounds close. So yeah, I'm feeling a bit more buoyant than I was earlier. Still going to be a tall order to get a fish, not just so far in terms of getting a bite. You know, it's always hard getting your first bite from a new lake because you don't really know what works. I've got a bit of an advantage here, or a lot of advantage, because obviously I've been using the boat, so I could see that they'd been feeding, and so I know I've got a bait mix down there which, if it doesn't get obliterated by the shoals of ravenous rudd, should do the job. But the biggest problem potentially is going to be actually landing one, because, and I don't think it's going to help matters, or be a real advantage to go out in the boat. I think I'm going to have to, if I do get a bite, I'm going to have to play it as if I'm playing a fish under ice. I mean, most of this weed is floating, and the weed that's on the bottom shouldn't really be an issue, but the surface, it's really bad. You know, if I connected with a fish and lifted the rod up, then that line is going to be a proper washing line of weed, and that could jam in the tip ring and cause all sorts of problems. So, you know, you're thinking with carp fishing, it's always so important to think of things that can go wrong ahead of you and try and neutralise them before they happen. I'm really big on that. I think that's so important, and I'm always looking for possible obstacles, and so that I can mitigate them. And certainly the style of playing a fish is going to be key, I think. So it's going to be keep the rod tip under the water and hopefully just lead the fish away from the islands, and just, you know, I've done it quite a lot before. You know, it's a very good tactic for playing fish actually, and a lot of match anglers do it. First person that told me about it was Steve Ringer, and a lot of people do it in matches because it stops the fish boring down and surging away from you. They tend to come in really quite quietly and placidly, and I've done it a lot when I've been floater fishing, when there's been a lot of weed around and you're using lightish gear and you really can't afford the fish to get into the weed. Instead of getting a rod up and just trying to bully them, which makes them go down into the weed, just putting that rod tip down low to one side and just slowly winding, it's incredible what you can achieve. So that's the plan. If I get a bite, I'm going to play it as if I'm playing it under ice, and then when I get it in close, try and net it conventionally. But we shall see. I had a couple of questions about already. I posted a picture of the swim on my feed, and a couple of the questions were like, why have you got your rod tips down low under the water when there's so much weed? Well, that is because all the weed, or the majority of it, the problematic weed that's out there, is floating on the surface. So I want my rods and the line underneath that so that, as I said, if I get a bite, I can play it with the line and the rod underneath it, rather than lifting it up and just create an absolute hellish mess, I think. So that's that, and my lines aren't slack. I've got a drop on the bobbin, but the clutches are screwed up really tight. So I've got a drop on a bobbin of 4 or 5 inches, bobbin goes up, smacks into the alarm, and then everything will lock up. But it's just enough of a drop to give me those succession of bleeps that I will need. You know, I mean, if I was fishing with a locked up clutch, tight line and bobbin at the top, even with the world's most sensitive alarm, you're not going to get loads of indication, which if I was to drop into a very rare sleep at about 3 in the morning and be zoned out, you know, you need sometimes, you know, a few bleeps to recognise that something's going on. So we got a couple of messages on the YouTube channel also about this, the bobbins and so on. When we were fishing on the last film, we were fishing up against some pads, and I had my bobbins lying on the ground, even though I was fishing locked up 2 pads. So some people were worried about what it would show and indicate if I got a drop back. So first of all, I mean, there's a couple of things to bear in mind. I mean, if I got a bite, the fish is going to try and get in the pads. So it's forward motion. 99.9% of any bites in that situation are going to be forward motion. So the water was very clear. It was short range. Look at that. Look, mosquitoes out in November. Unbelievable. It was short range in very, very clear water. So I didn't want to have my line cutting visibly through the water. It was a day session, and or it was fishing during the day, and I was worried about the visibility and everything. So fishing the line laying slack along the bottom up to the pads, when I say slack, it hasn't got any tautness in it. As soon as a fish picks that up, I'm going to get instant indication at the rod end, because it's only 30 yards and it's braid. If a fish did drop back towards me, I will also get very, very good indication, because anything that's on the bottom, whether it's a stone or a twig or anything on the bottom, as the fish comes back towards me with the rig, the line is going to get caught on the various little roughages on the bottom, and that's going to create a fulcrum, which is going to pull the line tight, which is going to give you indication. So unless you were fishing in, you know, a bathtub situation, but I should say a swimming pool, you know, a totally flat, clean bottom, you will get indication, particularly with braid that's very, very sensitive. So yeah, hopefully that's answered some of the questions. I've got a feeling that anything that does happen is going to be nocturnal. Again, it's a tall order to get a fish, but maybe we could squeeze one out. I just want to get, sound a bit dodgy, doesn't it? I just want to get my first fish from here, because then, you know, in terms of rigs and the hook bait choice and everything, you know, it's the first bite is always really the most important bite of a campaign. It sets the tone, it gives you the confidence, it teaches you a lot. So I'm not there yet. Tonight is my 3rd night on the lake. I did 2 last week and I've got tonight. So we'll see. It's not a lot of time, but it's enough. You know, there's 80 fish in here, 3 nights. I think we could muster a bite. Let's be positive. We've got the lake to ourselves as well. There's no one else here. It's paradise fishing, really. And the fish, if we can get one, I'm confident it'll be a bit of a worldie film star, which we will obviously relish and show you in amongst these late autumn, early winter leaves. That's the dream, that's the target, that's the objective. Let's just see if we can make it happen as the Midnight Express rumbles on in the distance. So if you see me in the morning, if the next time you see me it's daylight, we might not have caught anything, but we'll take the rough with the smooth. We're out here doing what we love. Where else would I rather be, you know? It's, well, at home with my family, but I've just done a few nights of that, and right now, there's nowhere else I'd rather be. This is it. We're out doing it. We're lucky to be doing it. Well, one night was a bit of a tall order, I guess, but we took the challenge and ultimately we failed, but I'm not going to make any excuses. I'm pretty sure that I've done something wrong. And like I was saying last night, until you get that first bite on a new water, you don't really know what's going to work and what's going to do it for you in terms of every element, really, areas they're willing to feed on, what's going to be the best rig, and what's the preferred bait combination. I shouldn't really, you know, I'm not certainly not beating myself up about it. I've done 3 nights so far on a new ticket, and it always is a learning curve everywhere you go. Very rarely do you just pick something from the outset and it just works. Sometimes that happens, but usually you have to slot the puzzle together as you go. So we had a few liners last night. There were a few fish boshing about. They were quite active actually, considering the time of year, but we've had nice stable weather recently, which I think is, for any phase of the winter, even early winter like this, it's well, this is right on the cusp of late autumn and early winter, but when you get periods of really stable weather where the days and the nights are pretty much consistent for a couple of weeks, it's much more favourable than the sharp decreases and the big increases and so on. So that's probably why the fish were active last night. It's a very shallow lake, so they're going to react quickly to anything meteorologically positive. But you know, it's that's one of the things that will make it in theory a good winter water. You know, shallow lakes do tend to tick more of the boxes than deep lakes, but yeah, we'll see. I've been on my toes this morning and been off and had a little look round. Now there's an area over to my left in the far corner where I heard 3 crashes during the night. I heard crashes elsewhere, but that was one zone that had 3, and I've just got an inkling that there might be numbers of fish in that little tiny channel using the snags and so on. So I went round there a short while ago with a bit of bait, and actually I went round there without any bait the first time. I just went for a walk and a look, and you know, this lake last week was tap clear, and up that channel it's definitely not tap clear. It's still bloody clear, but it's just not quite as pin clear as it was. And there was a tiny little alcove that I stepped into, and I looked down and I could see the gravel and sand shelf maybe 4 or 5 foot down. And as you go through your carp fishing, some of you will know what I mean, sometimes you just know that if you stand in a particular spot long enough, you'll see a carp. And as soon as I looked into this bit, I just knew that there was going to be carp there at some point, and had been carp there. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to stand here for half an hour or an hour, I'm going to see one, no question. So I stood there and I started looking, and it only took 5 minutes, and a good size upper 20 mirror came through from the right, went round the spot and went back towards the overhang. So that's it, that was game on, you know, in a serious way. So I came back, got a bit of bait, and I've put that down on the spot. I'm going to leave it an hour or two, well, an hour, and then I'm going to go back and check it. My impatience will probably get the better of me, and the hour will probably become about half an hour, which might even dwindle down to 25 minutes. But I'll go back and check it shortly. So there's a glimmer, you know. Unfortunately, we've got to wrap this up by lunchtime, so squeezing a fish out of here before lunch is very, very, very tall order. But certainly once Luke's going to go and we're going to wrap this up at lunchtime, I'm going to stay tonight and fish it myself, and I think I can make an opportunity somewhere. I just feel I'm going to be on them today. I'm going to bring in all the rods shortly, and then I'm just going to be on foot, by boat, up trees. And I found a tree around there which is just sublime. I've just been up the top of that, but the light wasn't quite good enough to see what was going on. But I'm going to be on their case all day today, and I'm going to grind something out if it kills me. So it may be a stalked opportunity in the edge. That would be divine, you know. Just watching fish in the edge at this time of year is, at any time of year is special, but you know, at this time of year it's a rare and unique event. So that would be astonishing if I think I could winkle my first one out, stalked out the edge. But notwithstanding that, you know, I'm going to fish tonight, as I said, and the fish are active. I just need to go out and look at the spots that I fished last night and see whether they fed on them. If they have, that will indicate a rig change. If they haven't, then maybe a bait or amount of bait or something else. Maybe just a bag on the spot. Maybe I need to bait a little bit heavier to force a reaction from passing fish. I'm not sure, but hopefully it will slot together in my mind as I go through the day. So ultimately it's been a very short fishless session, but I wanted you guys to just have a taste of somewhere really special, a unique carp fishing situation. I've never, as I said before, in all the lakes and rivers that I've fished, I've never fished one quite like this, and that's quite magical. You know, a lake that's really, really shallow, really, really weedy, can only really be effectively fished by boat, although having seen it now, there are spots on the corners of islands that if you measured the wraps you could cast to. But open water, there's very little. I think I've seen one open water, 2 open water spots. So, you know, a lake that is festooned with islands, snags, weed, very, very shallow, very elusive carp that spend a lot of the days hiding. You know, it's an interesting little conundrum to solve. It is like a mini 𝗪𝗡𝗄𝗃, as 𝗪𝗏𝗃 was back in the day, and very, very special. So I'm going to be persevering. We may even do another film up here during the winter, but hopefully it's just given you a taste of maybe some fishing that you'll never do, because boat fishing and weed and all this isn't for everyone's liking, but maybe it's just giving you a little bit of a taste of something that is a little bit different and a little bit exciting. And you know, it's nice to know that these lakes are out there.